Enemy Territory-Quake-Wars, it's a brand new title from id Software in development at Splash Damage. It's the spiritual successor to Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, but taken into the Quake universe. So this is a game that has advanced the technology of the game, has a greater focus on team play, but takes place during the initial Strogg invasion of Earth.
Well, one of the reasons, well, I guess the big reason we chose to work on this setting is because I really like the Quake 2 universe. That was the original Quake 2 game was something that I worked on as sort of lead designer and producer, and was excited to sort of revisit that. And we felt like this was a great opportunity to sort of bring this universe into you know, the multiplayer action gaming genre, and give us this chance of bringing two really very different teams together, where most of the time you're facing two teams that are really just sort of reskinned versions of each other. This gives us the opportunity to have the GDF, which are Earth forces that have conventional weaponry, and they're being invaded by the Strogg forces, which have alien technology.
One of the big differences about Quake Wars in terms of the kind of maps that the game features is that all of them are really unique. So a good way to think of it, because this Strogg invasion of Earth is really a prequel to the Quake 2 and Quake 4 games, is as Quake 0. So we're talking about 60 years in the future, around 2060. Each of the missions that take place are really a beat in this original Strogg invasion of Earth. So in just the same way you'd think in World War II, you see games and movies that retell famous battles, each of these missions is exactly the same. And they all vary greatly, not just in the time of day or the type of weather, but actually their geographical location on Earth, ranging from temperate maps to arid desert maps or Arctic. Well, for example, one of the maps in Enemy Territory-Quake-Wars retells the story of how the GDF uncovered the functionality of slip gates. Now, in the Quake story, using the slip gates was how they launched the retaliation against Strogos. So being able to tell people how that came about, how they captured this technology, and how they were able to launch this retaliation is a good feature of the game. And most of the maps follow that. So there are homages to early things like, you know, early versions of the blaster or the railgun, and certain types of technology that existed for the Strogg that the GDF ultimately figure out, like the dropships that they use to launch their attack on Strogos.
If you're familiar with the original Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, you'll be familiar with the basics of the character class structure that we have in Enemy Territory-Quake-Wars. What we've done is we've went back to the drawing board and looked at what, you know, we wanted a defense class, we wanted an assault class, we wanted a support class, and so we've taken that theory, we've broken up into things like soldiers and medics and engineers and technicians and such. Each class, once again, like it did with Wolf-E.T., plays a really important role in the game. It's not just sort of what they're carrying, it's more like what their skill is. And so, for the engineers class, doing things like dropping defense turrets is extremely key to the game. Or the field ops or oppressor class being able to call in fire support and drop in the type of fire support they want directly into the battlefield plays a key role into the game. And so I would say that like in Wolf-E.T., where the character classes were just vital to the gameplay and working together as a team was important, we tried to carry that forward.
In a lot of single-player games for some time, you've had very advanced physics for vehicles which have allowed you to do things like off-roading and racing and flying and have a greater level of realism. What we've tried to do with Enemy Territory-Quake-Wars, because it started out as a multiplayer title, is build physics that worked across the networking but that more realistically simulated the kind of feedback you expected from vehicles. The great thing about this is that each of the vehicles therefore can fulfill a specific combat role. So a tank really is capable of travelling off-road, and a fast-flying hovercopter is really good at dogfighting. These functions of the vehicles extend the character classes in the game, so kind of really just reinforcing this sense of a real focus on team play.
With the vehicles, back to one of the exciting things for me about the universe is having these two very, very different teams. And so having two different types of technology on the battlefield allows us to have a wide variety of different vehicle types, ranging from things like the Goliath Walker which is like people familiar with mechs and things like that, to traditional tanks on the battlefield. And although the controls will work similarly, they actually, because of the way the physics works and because we're going down and modeling the physics on like tires and tank treads, that what they can do and the way they behave is very differently. And actually, as you begin to play more, you begin to use it to your own, use it to your advantage. The things like the tank can travel over. It's things that perhaps like the Badger and stuff would probably get stuck on because it's four-wheeled vehicle. Desecrators, which is basically sort of almost like a Strog
hover tank.
I
guess. Uses gravitonic repulsors though, which are modelled realistically.
Yes, it
I mean,
does.
if you could control gravity, then that's how they'd be modelled.
And even things like the flying vehicles, the difference between like the Anansi and the Hornet, they actually are modeled off of different physics. And their flying controls are similar, but the things you can do with them once you begin to learn sort of more advanced skills with them is actually quite a bit different. So,
well, I mean, if you're dogfighting, for example, between an Anansi and a Hornet, the Anansi is the GDF human hovercopter. So this is effectively a ground effect vehicle, but it can get to quite high altitude, and it has thrusters on the side that propel it forward, and it has air brakes. Now the Hornet has 4 gravitonic repulsors. This is the Strog vehicle. Now it's kind of the gameplay equivalent, but it has completely different physics. And what this means is that while you're dogfighting in an Anansi, you might pull off traditional moves like loops or barrel rolls to lose altitude really fast so that you can get out of the kind of the combat cone of the Hornet. The Hornet can roll and gain altitude upwards. So it adds this really interesting dynamic to the way that you dogfight. It's not kind of the traditional approach. And this is the same whether it's the Anansi hovercopter fighting against the Hornet or the GDF Titan tank against the Strog heavy walker Goliath, or even, for example, the hog truck for the Strog, which is just a kind of crazy scout ramming device that you just point at stuff and boost at them and it will just pile straight through things. Kevin was the lead designer on Quake 2, and I was the lead designer working with Kevin as creative director on Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. So we'd worked together for a couple of years, prior to Quake Wars. And I think it must have been the summer of 2003 we started working on the design. Mm-hmm. And then I guess maybe about 6 to 9 months we did research and development, figuring out what the technology was going to be, how the design for the game was going to work, writing the 300-page game design document. And so I guess it's probably about a year in research and development and maybe another year and a half in proper production.
Yeah, as far as when you're looking at some of the base ideas for the game, they really began back with Wolf MP. And just like with any game, you have a ton of ideas that you want to get done and you plan for, and some of them fit with the current game design, some of them are a little bit outside of what the game design is all about. And so you sort of save those and build those up, and so I was pretty excited after Wolf MP to go on to do Wolf Enemy Territory and the same thing. I really liked the gameplay we developed. I liked the team play. I liked the way the character classes work together. And so it was just almost, I wouldn't even say it was the day after. We were actually working on the design for it while we were doing
a month or so while we were finishing Wolfenstein Enemy Territory.
Yeah.
But it has been a natural evolution between Return to Castle Wolfenstein multiplayer, which was the first game to introduce objective-based gameplay. So prior to that, all anybody did was capture flags and play deathmatch. And then when you moved into Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, we added character advancement and campaign length, persistence across the battlefield, and reinforced this sense of missions and things. And Quake Wars really is kind of a generative evolution of that same kind of philosophy of game design, of a really strong focus on team play, keeping all of the players involved. Well, I suppose every aspect of Wolfenstein Enemy Territory has been evolved or improved in some sense. Mm-hmm. The plan currently is to have persistent-based character status, so that your ranking and the stats that you track and everything would continue persistently. But we're wary of having rewards which unbalance the game for new people coming into a campaign. So the rewards that you pursue while you're playing for the duration of a campaign are more gameplay affecting, and the ones that you receive that are persistent, the goal is to have them represent your status as a player, the length of time you've been playing and how good you are.
Yeah, and the reward system for the campaign is really built around rewarding people for playing together as a team. Actually, just a kill gets you the least amount of points. So doing things that actually support the overall team goal is what rewards you the best. And we found out in Wolfenstein Enemy Territory, it really drives a lot of how people sort of progress through the game, how they choose to do their actions, and it comes out as a great formula there, and we try to take that and expand it. But like Paul said, that really affects the campaign, which is a three mission event. Outside of that, we have persistent stats. We found that if you make things that affect gameplay last too long, you really unbalance it for people who come in like a year later. It doesn't affect people for the first few months, but after that it begins to be a problem.
With Enemy Territory Quake Wars, we track every single action that you complete that assists the team. So whether you're an engineer constructing defense turrets, a field ops character class deploying fire support, a medic reviving your teammates, a covert ops off on missions gathering reconnaissance on the team, or a soldier escorting a mobile command post, all of those things, the experience points that you gain for those team-based actions are more valuable than simply fragging the enemy. And so we know when you have excessive experience points in any of those categories that you are a good team player. We were talking about the original high concept, and neither Kevin or I are programmers. And well, Doom 3 is essentially a linear indoor single-player first-person shooter. And we wanted to make a multiplayer, outdoor, terrain-based game with vehicle combat. And we wanted to use the Doom 3 engine. And I think that when we started out, as non-programmers, we thought that would be the biggest hurdle. But the great thing about id Technology is how flexible it is. I mean, companies could choose to use it to make a real-time strategy game or a role-playing game or whatever, because what it is fundamentally is just a very, very good renderer with a really good physics engine. So we had to extend the networking, and we had to build in, additions to the vehicle physics. And as Kevin said, we had John Carmack devise the megatexture technology for us, but really that initial foundation was what we thought would be the biggest hurdle. I'd say probably just transatlantic communication, the fact that Splash Damage are based in London and id Software based in Dallas. We generally do everything via ICQ, so that can lead to misunderstandings and stuff. But we travel a lot as well. Kevin tends to come out and visit us in London, and I try and get over here to Dallas as often as I can.
It's huge technical challenges and game design challenges that we've been through. When you look at, like Paul was talking about, taking the Doom technology and advancing it where we want it to be for this type of game, we spent a lot of time working that through early in the game development to try to get the fundamental elements out of the way. The networking support, the physics, the outdoor rendering, all that was big challenges. Now what we're looking at is just the issues of communicating the gameplay to the player. The interface issues and how best to take what really is a deep game that has a lot of complexity to it, and bringing that out so people can, when they get into it, can understand, okay, this is exactly what I need to do. Here's my objective. Here's how I work together to support the team. And we've got the solutions worked out through things like the solo assignment system.
Well, I think one of the great things, one of the things that I'm quite proud of that we've overcome, because you see there is this asymmetry in the game, and it's very difficult to balance, because in a game where you do just reskin the two teams, what you can do is just do simple equations like damage over time, like how fast does a weapon fire, how much damage does it do, total that up, compare it to another weapon, and you can balance two weapons. But when you're dealing with completely asymmetrical tools, so the abilities of the Strog versus the abilities of the GDF are completely different, it becomes something that's quite difficult to balance. And because you can't guarantee that everybody on a server is playing with the same level of knowledge, you can't tell whether the two teams are balanced. So it becomes this kind of heuristic nightmare as opposed to being something that you can solve formulaically, if there is such a word as formulaically. So what we've done is we've got a system in the game that takes you as a brand new player, and when you jump into the game and you have absolutely no idea what you're supposed to do. So let's say, for example, you click soldier and you click deploy, You don't even know what a soldier does. I mean, obviously he fights people, but you don't know what he's carrying and the equipment that he has, his loadout. And on your team, there's a covert ops guy who's been off and performed reconnaissance on the enemy base. So he's gathered intelligence on the location of a STROG strategic strike gun. And you're the perfect class to go and destroy it, but you just simply wouldn't know about it. You don't even know that you're carrying a heavy explosive charge. But what the Solar Assignment System does is dynamically allocate missions or make missions available to players based on the status of the game, the position of the objectives, and how everything is progressing, so that you as a soldier know exactly where to go, what to do when you get there, and what your reward's going to be for completing that mission. Kevin has an analogy which I think is a reasonable one. There were people in Return to Castle Wolfenstein multiplayer who would put up 50, 60 player servers and stuff. And it's good fun, but it becomes a street fight, as Kevin says. And I think in talking to Kevin early on, we both felt that between 24 and 32 players was really the sweet spot. And you have to bear in mind that we're not talking about, for example, capturing flags all over a map or an assault mode where people are dispersed across a map. Enemy Territory Quake Wars has a very specific front line with a series of objectives that your team is trying to complete. And because everybody knows where the combat is, there tends to be a higher level of intensity between these two pieces of contentious territory. So when Kevin and I discussed it early on, 12 versus 12 to 16 versus 16 just had a really nice feel. It worked really well in Wolfenstein Enemy Territory. And so far, I think it's tested out well with Quake Wars as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues that for each team in any of these combat games is basically controlling an area for a certain amount of time. And that's the way it works in enemy territory as well, except it's a very focused front line. So there is a specific objective that has to be accomplished that requires the assaulting team to be able to control that space. And you know, as you get into numbers like 60 or something like that, it is a lot of people being able to interject themselves into that space, and you do basically devolve the gameplay into what I would consider more of a street fight, just people running around with rocket launchers and stuff. So yeah, the 24 player numbers, what we feel like is been a pretty good gameplay count. You can play with more. Actually, the gameplay holds up pretty well with even like 6-on-6 and stuff like that. Yeah,
it scales really well.
So it scales pretty good.
You can as well. You can run a server with any number you want, yeah. Obviously dependent on the amount of power of the server, as we don't physically lock the maximum number that you can add to a server.
Yeah, and as far as the number of maps, what we're looking at is about 12. Now we have more in production, and we may go out with 1 or 2 more. We may go out with 1 or 2 less. It really just depends on how well they come together. In terms of what they're all about, I mean, we cover a wide variety of territory, all the way from like snow themes and gameplay at dusk and desert themes. The maps are mission specific, so they don't play out like sort of arenas that have just different objectives placed in different locations. Each has a specific theme that follows through with the story, and each plays out extremely unique to that map. Well, right now we've just passed what we'd consider to be alpha, and I guess that was actually a couple of months ago. Now we're moving pretty close to beta stage, and so enemy territory Quake Wars, because of the way the map production works with the mega texture, it's a little bit different than what normal level design is, where you have being able to develop the texturing and the map at the same time, and you sort of like with normal texturing, just move a building here and you just move the textures with it. It's a little bit more complex with this game, and so there's a lot of post gameplay development or post alpha development that has to go just for art, and so that's a little bit of an unknown for us right now. But I'd say that we're pretty close to that schedule, and our goal is to try to get it out this year.
Well, like you say, the id Software have this history. I mean, not just as a company that originated the idea of mod making their games, but also of continuing to support their players and the mod making community for years after their games have been released, with the eventual releases of source code and everything else. And with Quake Wars, it's really no different. The game has been built from the ground up to be very modelable, with most of the game controllable in script. all of the tools designed to make it as easy as possible to create maps, for example. So just taking geometric texture distribution as an example, a level designer who would ordinarily be scared at the prospect of having to make a map that was a mile across can generate a piece of terrain in a tool like World Machine and then import it into our game and just click go for the environment that they want, and it will place all of the right textures on all of the right slopes and sides of the hills and things, so they can actually get going with a generated landscape that looks appropriate automatically at the start. They can then just jump in and start building geometry in just the same way that they would have done traditionally and have something together pretty quickly that represents a playable map. And that's pretty much the same approach for the way that you add animations to the game, or you mod the game, or change weapon values, or want to script or make a vehicle work. So I think that mod makers can look forward to really good support in the game. And although we don't know for definite yet how soon the tools will be released after the game or around the same time of the game and stuff, it's obviously a really high priority for us because of our background. Probably the funniest moment was when we first put the quad bike in the game. We had at the time a set of pre-production testers at our offices at Splash Damage in London, and id and Activision and a bunch of other guys were over kind of playtesting the game for a week or two. And just prior to their visit, when the quad bike had gone in, the playtesters all wanted to see it, and we had them playing Struggle. We were playing on the GDF side. One of the guys on our team started putting heavy explosive charges on the quad bike, and we rolled it from the top of a mountain down the hill into the center of their base. And as all of the playtesters ran over to look at the new quad bike, all of the charges went off, literally just firing their ragdolls off across the map. I think that's probably one of the most satisfying moments.